This is Daya. Daya is one of my subscribers. They've got a fabulous accent, and their home is in need of a little bit of assistance, to put it nicely. They have no furniture, very few lighting options, a very strange color of light blue walls when their entire Pinterest board is just full of white walls, and the cherry on top is that they have no floor. It's just subfloor. So we've got to try to turn this into this. And we're doing it on a £300 to £500 budget, because UK, not dollars. Blech. Unfortunately, this makeover will never actually materialize into real life, because literally the day after our Zoom call, Daya found out that they would need to move much sooner than they expected. And so they're going to have to put most of that £300 to £500 budget into moving rather than into furnishing this space. So, unfortunately, that's the situation, but sometimes that's just how life works. And I really wanted to include this in a video because sometimes life doesn't go the way you want. Sometimes you don't get to have your apartment furnished the way you want. Sometimes you need to move quickly. Sometimes you just don't have money for things. And again, life happens. So I really want to stress the point that sometimes that's just how life works, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with you if you don't have your home fully furnished or perfectly styled all of the time, because literally no one does that. Literally no one, unless you're some rich celebrity who has a home that you never live in that is always perfectly styled for parties or whatever. But literally no one has their home fully furnished, perfectly styled in the exact perfect ideal state all the time. And that's really one of my biggest pet peeves about interior design content on the internet, is that it creates this really weird expectation that our homes need to be perfect, and I hate it. So anyways, am I getting red? I'm apparently very passionate about that. Oh, and my back's starting to hurt already. Great. Love that. Oh, I should probably stretch more or something. I am turning 30 next year, so... Okay, so our main goals with this makeover are flooring, first of all. We want to make sure that there is no more subfloor and that there is something on the ground, whether it's carpet or paint or ideally hardwood flooring, because that's what's in almost all of their inspiration photos on Pinterest. Lighting is really important because right now there is one main source of light and one lamp. The light bulbs that are in there right now are definitely not a warm white, and it's kind of upsetting. We definitely need to paint the walls because literally every single photo on their Pinterest board has white walls. And then our last goal is to figure out some sort of better layout, because right now there's literally just a bed in there, and they want to be able to have a couch so that they can have multiple people over. And where the bed is currently placed, there's a creepy door that leads out to a creepy hallway, and the vibes are just off, and so we gotta fix that. So we're starting off like we do with every single makeover by just looking and seeing what's available. We know what we want our layout to be. In practice, we didn't actually get to take measurements, but in theory, pretend like we have our measurements set and defined. And we know the general vibe that we're going for. So I'm just looking at this point for anything that feels like a reasonable price for this $300 to $500 budget. And... and we're also not going to talk about the fact that I was looking in LA because I just felt like it, because I knew we weren't going to be doing this makeover in real life, so it kind of didn't really matter where I was looking. So I chose LA because honestly I want to maybe live there for a year or two at some point. And so I just like the idea of familiarizing myself with LA in general. What type of things are available, and whatever information I can get my hands on is great. In general, I more or less tend to start with the biggest pieces of furniture first, because these tend to be the most functional, right? So when you're furnishing a space, especially if you're on a pretty tight budget, making sure that your space is functional first is really going to be the most important thing. And then within that and from that, you can play with aesthetics and matching things to your mood boards and whatnot. But making sure that your everyday life is actually functioning in the way that you would like it to function, that is critical to be your number one priority. In addition to the bigger functional things, you also want to think about small functional things. I know that's maybe not a helpful distinction, but the type of things that you wouldn't normally, if you're furnishing a bedroom, you want to get a bed and a mattress and nightstands, but also you might need extension cords or light bulbs or little hooks to put on the inside of your closet or something. You need to remember these things because these will matter for your overall budget, because if you don't factor these things in, you will go over budget. Oh, and speaking of budget, while Daya did say that their budget is £300 to £500, they did also say that they're a little bit flexible with that, and that You know, if it's something that they can bring with them, you know, and it's really an investment piece and stuff like that, we can go like a little bit over budget. So not to give too much of a spoiler, but we do go slightly over budget, but really not bad by any means at all. Ooh, and then I want to pause here again because I loved this rice paper lampshade. I know Daya already has a rice paper lampshade in their room. Ultimately, I decided against it, specifically because we were already going over budget and they already had a rice paper lampshade for the main light fixture in their room. But this is one of those things that if you have the budget, like maybe you already have something that's like good enough, it's fine. Maybe you got it from like IKEA or a thrift store when you were in college or something. But if you find something that you love 10 times more and you have the budget for it, I would absolutely recommend getting it, because this is one of those things where like, I think it was $75, which on a £300 to £500 budget is kind of a lot, especially when you already have something that fulfills the function of it. But I just love the shape so much more. So this is one of those things that if I was actually like designing the space for Daya in real life, I would recommend that they get this, but it would also be the last thing that I recommend they get. Because again, sometimes budget can creep up on you. Sometimes, especially with clients that I'm not like working with in person and they're like halfway across the world, sometimes you're out thrifting and you'll just find something that you're like, oh, this is really perfect. And maybe it's an additional thing that we weren't even considering adding to the space originally. And so that can really kind of throw off your budget. So this is one of the things that, again, function first, let's use what we have. And if there's a budget for it, I would have loved to include this. And then I found a bunch of blankets that were gorgeous. This one is wool, and it's also from Minnesota. So, you know, hi, hey, I'm also from Minnesota. Cute. And then there was this listing. It just said vintage knit blankets, and they misspelled knit, and it was listed for $10. The blankets are $10 each. The listing makes it sound like these blankets are nothing special. And for the most part, they are nothing special, right? They're, you know, any random blanket that you would find at a thrift store. But this Welsh blanket, I really want to know what the story behind this Welsh blanket is, because I can't believe that we found a Welsh blanket and it has the year 1812 on it. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if this blanket was made in 1812, because it looks like it's in really good condition. But even if it wasn't made in 1812, it's still a phenomenal blanket. And I was not expecting to find this for $10. So if you're in LA, if you're in Santa Monica, go pick this up if it's still available, because so good. And then this section where I was looking at art, I would have loved to have an even bigger art budget, but I think it's really smart to at least include a little bit of a budget for art. Some of these things were really affordable, but I think it's important to note that I didn't choose the art specifically because it was affordable. I picked it because I genuinely loved it, and I felt it fit within the overall vibe and the overall color scheme. And like this one, it says the frame is cracked, so it would need a new frame or it would need to be fixed. It doesn't actually look like the material of the frame itself is cracked, it's just the joints that would need reinforcing. So something like this would be a really great way to get art for cheap, especially if you notice that there's an imperfection and the seller has it listed for a little bit higher. That could definitely be something that you could use to negotiate the price down a little bit. Be like, hey, I noticed there's some scratches on this frame or something. I've actually done that in like normal thrift stores. Like I literally think I did that once in Goodwill, and I haggled the price down at a Goodwill, which I don't recommend you try to do, because these poor workers are just trying to get through their day. But if something is like clearly overpriced compared to the rest of the things, and there is an obvious defect, it's worth a shot. Now, this red canvas that I pulled up, it is $1,500. So obviously this is not within our budget. But if you've seen my very first YouTube video, which is horrible, please do not go watch it. If you've seen that, you know that it's actually totally reasonable to be able to like DIY a giant piece of art basically for free, or like free-ish. Like maybe spending a couple dollars here and there, but like basically for free. Like I love it visually. I think the pop of red is incredible, and it would be really easy to DIY. Again, obviously I'm not saying to like copy this and then try to sell it as this person's work, because that is highly unethical. But if you're on a really tight budget, you can't spend $1,500. You don't even have $1,500 for the whole makeover, right? Let alone one piece of art. It's totally okay and totally within your rights to DIY something that is very similar, that is very heavily inspired by this. There is nothing wrong with that. And then of course we needed a couch. When you're on this tight of a budget, my suggestion will always be to find a free couch, or like a $50 couch or something. Find a really cheap couch that has an okay color and an okay shape. As long as the color and the shape aren't like horrible, you'll be fine. Some of these are definitely a little dated, and it might take you a while to find something that's like really good, but if you're trying to furnish a space with a couch on a budget, this is by far the best way to do it. Obviously, you know, be mindful of the couches that don't look structurally sound, or, you know, ones where it looks like the cat thought that the arms of the sofa were a scratching post. Avoid those ones, but as long as it looks like it's in halfway decent condition, stuff can always be cleaned. Obviously try to avoid big stains, but like things can be cleaned. It definitely takes some elbow grease, but you don't have to pay someone to professionally clean things, unless you have like really intense allergies or something like that. And then I just wanted to do a quick little reminder of what their mood board looked like. These are just a few specific images that I pulled out from their Pinterest board to really kind of like get the vibe across, right? It's all white walls, rice paper lampshades, plants, but not like way too many plants, and then like a couple pops of color. For a little bit more context, here is their whole entire mood board. And cozy lighting. Cozy lighting and natural lighting were definitely big. Shelves with a lot of books on them. Overall, the vibe is very like warm and comforting and inviting and cozy, not too fussy, but also still relatively clean and simple. I did see a listing for this exact like snowman type of, I think it's called a Noguchi lamp. That's probably the most American way of saying that ever, but we don't have to talk about that. We've got mixed wood tones, we've got some color and some patterns going on, but nothing that's like too in your face and overwhelming. And then like every once in a while, an interesting piece that you don't see very often. There's a few little pops of chrome in there, and the colors that were really coming up were like a reddish orange color and then like a cobalt blue, which again, I have mentioned in many a previous video. But yeah, like half of my Facebook Marketplace tabs that I opened up just decided to crash on me, and I could not refresh them. So a lot of the things that I was kind of envisioning for this space kind of just got lost into the ether. So that was unfortunate, but again, sometimes stuff like this happens and you can't find the thing again, and it sucks, and you move on. So now I went through the tedious process of removing the background from all of these that, as you'll know if you've been here for more than like 2 seconds, I used to have a much more tedious process, and at least this process is a lot less time consuming. I have found, if you are using this specific background remover tool at the very least, I have found that if you tend to crop the image to like right outside of where the actual object is, that works a lot better than just like importing the screenshot. Because like sometimes I'll have to go in and erase a lot of things, and sometimes it doesn't quite understand what I'm trying to erase, and it's a little frustrating. So I definitely recommend cropping these to just outside of what you need before you import them into this. And then yes, I definitely found way too many pictures of monsteras. This is one of those things that if I'm like putting together this weird combination of like a mood board and a mock-up that I do, I like to have multiple different options of things, whether that's angles or furniture, especially if I'm doing chairs. I like to have like a front view and an angled view and a side view and a back view. And with this monstera, I really wanted to be able to make the lighting that was on the leaves kind of look believable. So basically I just removed all of the backgrounds for all of these pictures, and then I played around with it once I actually brought all of the images into the space, and I just kind of picked which one looked best. And then the infamous sorting section. We're going to put all of the lighting with all of the other lighting. We're going to put all of the plants with all of the other plants. We're going to put all of the pots with the pots. We're going to put all of the art with the art. And then, you know, not to be too annoying, but the rugs with the rugs, the lamps with the lamps, the tables with the tables. And then we're just going to start playing around with the things that we know were kind of standing out to us, the things that we know are the cheapest, the things that we know will work the best in the space. They already had this green bedding, and this color green definitely showed up a lot in their mood boards, so I wanted to make sure that we included that, because again, there is no point in wasting money on things that you already have. I really ended up loving these little IKEA sconces, and these are something that no one's going to notice when they walk into your room. No one is going to be like, wow, I really love those IKEA sconces. They're so subtle, and they blend into the wall so well. But I think it's these kind of little details that really bring a space together, because with the age of social media, I feel like everything has tended towards, let's make it big and bright and flashy, and everything needs to be a statement piece, and that is just not true. In fact, I think I mentioned this in one other video, but I don't remember which, so I'll mention it again. My rule of thumb is that you either need to only have one statement piece. You can't have 0 statement pieces, you can't have 2, you can't have 3 or 4 or 5. One statement piece. Or, if you're a Leo, you can probably get away with doing literally everything in statement pieces. But that's probably the only exception. But then you literally need to do every single thing is a statement piece. And they all have to work together somehow. which I feel is so much harder. So take that with a grain of salt, figure out if that makes sense for your space. But that is what my general rule of thumb is. Here I did some really simple perspective. Perspective really doesn't have to be hard, but I just wanted to make sure that these shelves didn't look like complete garbage. So without like going into a whole entire tutorial, you just follow the floor line and the ceiling line in the photo that you have, figure out where those lines cross, and then use that point to figure out where all of the other lines go. Again, I don't necessarily anticipate that you are going to be doing this specific style of like mood board / mock-up, because I feel like this is very specific to me and how I tend to visualize spaces. But if you're doing anything with a photo that involves like perspective, I would highly recommend doing it that way. Probably the best hack that I've found so far for getting a giant area rug for either free or very, very cheap is to look for people who are listing carpet remnants. These are typically taken out of like homes that people are renovating. Usually they're like, taking out the carpet, putting in hardwood floor, or, more frequently luxury vinyl plank, which is not luxurious in the least. Please never put luxury vinyl plank in anything. It's so bad. I know it's cheaper than hardwood when you buy it new, but like, it's so bad. Just please don't. Please. It is possible. Oh, and this this reminds me of something that I was going to mention earlier. It is possible to find hardwood flooring for free or for very cheap. It's not super, super common, but it does happen. Again, a lot of times people are pulling out this like yellowed oak flooring from homes that were like built or renovated in the 80s, and it's perfectly good hardwood flooring. At 2 different points in my life, I have actively found hardwood flooring for free, and then the other time I found hardwood flooring for 31, 32, 33 cents per square foot, somewhere around there. I think both times it was this exact same color of flooring, and while this color is perfectly fine, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Obviously, if it's in a house where everything else is also dated to the 80s, it will look dated, but I found out that if you just sanded off the finish, it was beautiful wood. Like, I know it's already, like, solid hardwood flooring, but it's so much more beautiful when you take that yellow finish off. Obviously, you would have to make sure to put some sort of other finish onto it, so you don't just have bare wood, because that will dry out, and it will take up stains a lot more easily, and it will not be good. But anyways, I was saying all of that to say that my assumption for this space was that we were going to find free hardwood flooring. And not just that we were going to find it by sheer luck or happenstance, but we were going to actively search for it. We were going to turn on our Craigslist search alerts. We were going to... Does Facebook have notifications? I should really know this. I honestly usually just use Craigslist because it has search alerts that go to my email, and then every single day, every single morning when I wake up, I check my Craigslist search alerts just to see if there's anything that happens to be like small enough to fit into my roommate's car. And so yeah, those are my assumptions for the space. Daya did say in our initial call that they do have someone who they can rent a van from for cheap for a little bit if they need to like go pick something up off Marketplace or whatever. So again, like with the sectional and the giant rug and all of that, that is definitely doable within the scheme. It makes design a lot harder when you do not have a large enough vehicle to be able to go pick things up, which I am finding out firsthand from experience right now because my Suburban won't start and it just won't work, and I don't have the like $3,000 to $5,000 that I need to fix it. So that's always fun. That's great. I think in our initial conversation for the layout, we did talk about the bed being where it is, and then the couch just being like a regular 7-foot couch, and then facing away from the bed to kind of create a separation between the bed and the couch, which would totally work fine. But I think it just creates a more inviting layout to have a sectional and to kind of have that living room feel a little bit more open, because otherwise that corner over by the art and the lamp, which I do eventually end up getting rid of because of budget, but that corner over there, that's where the creepy door and hallway is, and I feel like having the couch facing the wall away from the bed is kind of facing towards that creepy hallway, and then it feels more closed off, and I don't know, I don't like it quite as much. So that's why I like a sectional. And also we had talked about having like 3 to 4 people over at a time, and so I love sectionals for that too, because otherwise you're going to need an accent chair. That's just another thing that you need to buy, and another thing you need to like transport. Again, it's just another thing. And honestly, I feel like in small spaces, having a sectional rather than a small couch and an accent chair and stuff like that, it can actually really help open up the space and make it feel bigger bigger because there aren't a bunch of little furniture pieces cluttering things up. Now again, like I said, Daya lives halfway across the world, so maybe if I was physically there in their space, I might feel slightly differently about it, because sometimes you just don't know the energy of a space until you physically step foot in it. So ultimately, I am going to trust Daya to do whatever makes the most sense for the layout. But like sometimes you really just need to like physically be in the space and physically be moving furniture around in order to find a layout that works for you. So this is where I did all the math, started to add everything up, and realized that we were a little further over budget than I was initially planning. So I decided to take out some of the more expensive and least useful things, like the giant floor lamp and then the art piece over by the bed, which I did really love. Again, if this were real life, and if Daya loved that art print as much as I did, this is one of those things that I'm like, you totally don't have to spend the money on this. But if you love this, like if this art really, really speaks to you, it might be worth it to just get it if you have the money for that. Because specifically with art, the best art collections are ones that are built slowly over time, piece by piece, right? You're not going to like, what is it, Decenio or whatever, and like buying a bunch of art prints just to like fill space on a gallery wall. That is not going to result in an art collection that you're in love with for decades. And like, I totally get that that might not be some people's goals, right? Maybe you don't care about having an art collection that you keep for decades. Maybe you do just care about filling space on a wall. But like, if you are trying to curate an art collection that you want to have for decades, just don't do the gallery wall thing where you just fill space on a wall. It's not good. Oh, and then sadly, I did have to end up removing this rice paper lampshade. I loved it. Again, I loved it so much. But yeah, we just had to go with the one that they already had. And then, seeing my budget, I wanted to go back and see if I could find some more specific pieces. A little side table, some extra sconces, and just see if I could find anything that was cheaper or that was better. So I found this cobalt blue table from IKEA, actually. But I think it's actually really cute, and I think it makes sense based on all of Daya's mood boards. And then I love that sconce in the background that I put behind the couch there. I think it just plays with light in such an elegant way. Normally I wouldn't like something that's quite as like spirally and diagonal as that, but I think it's very subtle, and I like the tiered effect, and I think it's just very nice. All right, so let's go over our budget. The shelves were $200. That is an estimate, but that is what I have priced out approximately that size space to be. It was our biggest investment piece, so I wanted to make sure to put that first. Again, we got the couch for free, the coffee table was $20, the living room rug / carpet was $30. That sconce that we found, plus the hardwired plug-in kit that we would need to like actually make it into a plug-in rather than just a hardwired thing, that was an extra $20. So $40 altogether for the sconce, and then $10 for the blue table. And then for the bedroom, the bed frame was $0. Again, we just found like the cheapest possible bed frame because very few of the pictures on their Pinterest board had any sort of visible bed frame or headboard. So I figured in that case, it's cheapest and easiest just to go with a free bed frame. $50 for the cute little rug, $50 for the nightstand, $15 for both of the sconces, and then $10 for the little like divider side table that's kind of going to act as a nightstand for the bed, and then also a side table for the couch. And then extra things that kind of didn't really fully go in either room. $10 for the table lamp, $10 for the Welsh blanket, which again, I still can't believe. $40 for the striped blanket that we put on the couch. The red art was free, which was great. The neutral, I think it was like pencil nude art, that was $40. And then about $50 for paint for the entire room. All you really would have needed to buy is 1 gallon of paint, and then a roller and one of the little like Wooster edging brushes. If you've ever tried to do edging with like a normal ass paintbrush and you hated it, please get one of these. I don't know what the price is on Amazon right now, but it's like $6 at your local hardware store. This brush will change your life, especially if you're like a little too confident like me and you don't tape when you paint. Getting one of these brushes will change your life. I painted an entire apartment, I think like a full 7 rooms. I used like this sort of just normal paintbrush, and it was horrible. I hated it. My hand was constantly in pain, and I could only paint for like maybe an hour at a time without my hand cramping up so bad that I had to stop. For this apartment, I got this little Wooster brush because I did my research. I got this little Wooster brush, and I could paint for hours on end without my hand going completely numb. It was fantastic, and I was able to paint this entire apartment in 3 days. So I highly recommend that. Sometimes, again, I'm not I won't encourage you to go buy something if it's not gonna like actually change your life. But for me, this is one of those things that like, if you are painting and you're going to be doing any sort of edge work, please buy this paintbrush. You will thank me. Oh, right, and then I never actually said the total. So the total that we came to was $575. So for saying that we could go a little bit over our budget, and our budget was $500, or pounds, but $575 for this good of a result, I think is not bad. Especially considering everything we got really is small enough and easy enough to bring with us, maybe with the exception of the sectional, but again, that was free. So the art we can bring with us, right, that's contributing to a lifelong art collection. The sconces are things that we can easily bring with us to any apartment. They're white, so they will go with literally any apartment as long as the walls are white. The one thing I didn't really factor in here is plants, but again, there's a grand total of 3 plants in this room, which is not a lot of money. The other day, I actually just saw someone who was giving away a giant monstera completely for free. So stuff like this doesn't have to cost a ton of money. Again, it'll take more time and energy and research because everything requires some amount of energy, whether that energy is money or time or research or whatever. But you really don't have to be spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars just to have a comfortable and beautiful home. Again, it's very much a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And like in Daya's case, sometimes life doesn't go the way you want. And sometimes your home isn't going to be perfectly furnished. And that's okay. It sucks sometimes. It can definitely suck, but it doesn't reflect anything about your character or who you are as a person. It's just the way things happen sometimes. So here is the before, and here is the after. I am very pleasantly surprised with how the space came out. It doesn't necessarily look like much right off the bat, but that's because a lot of the like budget and effort and energy went into painting the walls white and putting hardwood flooring in and putting the shelves up, which the shelves were our biggest investment piece. So all of that is kind of like boring background stuff, but it really makes such a difference. I really don't have a better word for it, but I am just absolutely gobsmacked by the fact that we were able to find a Welsh blanket for $10. I was not expecting that. And then I am really genuinely happy with how everything else came together. I think the strategy of finding a free couch that like is an okay color and an okay shape, when you're on this kind of budget, finding a free couch is going to be the thing that saves you, because couches are so expensive. And honestly, the same thing with a rug. Like any sort of big area rug, I would recommend looking for like big pieces of carpet. Like it's not actually a rug, it's a carpet. And usually the edges will be raw and just cut. I really genuinely have been into solid color rugs recently, so I think that fits really well with the overall vibe. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I really love the idea of investing wisely into pieces that maybe you're not spending $5,000 on a couch that you'll have forever, but at least with like a $300 to £500 budget, spending $200 on this like shelving unit system thingy that you can take with you very easily from apartment to apartment. It's not some giant piece of furniture that you need multiple people to move. You can install it by yourself, and it's kind of infinitely modular because if you have a smaller space, you can just cut the shelves shorter, and if you have a bigger space, you can just buy more shelves and brackets. This is one of those rare things that will absolutely follow you your entire life. I also really love that one of the things that was consistently showing up in Daya's mood boards was plants. And I love that we were able to use one big strategically placed plant to kind of act as like a wall or a barrier between the bed and the living room, and also to block the view between the bed and the creepy door/hallway. I think in this particular case, my strategy of starting with the cheapest possible things first, right? Like a free couch, a free bed frame. I think the carpet in the living room was like $30. Starting with that as a base and then like working from there, making decisions based off of that. I think that allowed us to really like have some extra money for some more fun, playful elements like the throw blankets and the art. Which, again, depending on financial situation, if Daya were doing this in real life and they decided that they wanted to save a little bit more money, they could still have a fully furnished apartment without those things, but also these things add so much. And I think they're so beautiful, and that's what really like ties the whole space together, are these two blankets and the art. So anyways, enough of my talking. Let's hear what Daya has to say about it.
Wow, that looks amazing. I think it turned out really, really beautiful. I love the big shelves and the colours, especially the blankets and the warm woods and that bedside table. The really unique blankets are a lovely touch. and I'm definitely gonna look for some that look like that. I love the big couch. It looks great for hosting people and makes the room look bigger, which is really nice. And I especially love the art, and it turned out really beautiful.
I'm so glad you like this as much as I did, Daya, because this was so much fun, and I'm so excited to see where you move to next and how you'll implement stuff like this into your new apartment. And now just a quick little surprise for all of you who actually stayed until the end. Dayax sent me a few pictures of some new things that they got, and I am so excited to share these with you. So, opening up this first photo here, they managed to find this gorgeous couch for $30. None of the couches I looked at were anywhere near this nice. So I am very happy that Daya found this couch. Obviously it's not a sectional, but with 1 or 2 good accent chairs, this will totally work for hosting people. I also really love that we were on the same page about the throw blanket. We did not talk about this at all in our consultation, but yeah, just based on the Pinterest boards, this fits so perfectly, and we were so on the same page about this, which I just love. I love that this Afghan in particular really brings in some more texture and color variation, because the couch is very flat, the rug is very flat, and it brings in a little bit more life and depth and dimension. And I also really love how it ties in the brown wood tone from the coffee table, but then it just like expands on it a little bit. I love the Monstera. Again, we were very much on the same page about that without actually talking about it in person, which I love to see. And then zooming in a little bit, I really love this like botanical coffee table book. Very cute, very like early 1900s like science textbook vibes, which I love. I love the asparagus fern and the vintage pressed glass. Very cute. I love the new position for the bed. Definitely feels much better over there. Definitely further away from the creepy hallway. I've definitely used a chair as a nightstand before, so definitely a vibe. And then I really love the art and the personal items that they've hung on the wall here. I assume the dried roses have a meaning. There's a cute little art piece here that I can't quite zoom in on enough to see exactly what's happening there. And then I love the prayer rug. I think the prayer rug really like expands on the color scheme. It's very much in alignment with the color scheme of the rug and the Afghan on the couch with the brown and like orangey tones as a base, but then it pulls in this like really beautiful blue that complements the green really nicely, and I am all for it. And then, last but not least, Daya found this incredible vintage IKEA shelf set. I think this is the absolute perfect thing for their room. I think it fits the vibe of their Pinterest boards so perfectly, and the only thing I'm not like 100% in love with is that it's not modular. So it's like slightly less versatile, but visually it's just so good that I think it evens out. And I'm so happy they found this. If you want me to make a video redesigning your space, email me at medorakiadesign@gmail.com with all of the things that I'm going to put up on the screen here, like dimensions and photos and videos and, you know, whatnot, all of that. Include all of these things, and I will make a video about your place at some point, depending on how much of a response I get. It's so much more fun for me making over real people's spaces with real budgets and real constraints, rather than just like finding a random photo on the internet of some random room and making it over. So please, please, please send me your rooms and show Daya some love down in the comments. Bye.